Important question. Mike German, you're with the ACLU. There have been a number of raids. These are the obvious, more obvious manifestations of this. Raids in Chicago and Minneapolis of activist homes. Can you talk about how wide this surveillance is and what you understand is happening in other parts of the country?
Sure. I think, like Scott said, we only see the tip of the iceberg. But in 2004, 2005, and 2006, the ACLU issued a number of Freedom of Information Act requests for Joint Terrorism Task Force investigations against a number of politically active groups who suspected that they were spied on the same way Scott did. And we uncovered widespread surveillance of different peace and justice groups, environmental groups, all kinds of different groups. That, in turn, started an Inspector General investigation that was just released in September of 2010 that showed that the FBI was opening these investigations with what they called factually weak predicates, sometimes even speculative predicates. So it wasn't that they thought that the groups were involved in any criminal activity now, but just that it was a possibility in the future they might be. Well, of course, that's true for all of us. We all might be future criminals, and that was the sole criteria that the FBI was using to open preliminary inquiries. Now, these are supposed to be predicated investigations where there is some factual basis. And these investigations, unfortunately, the IG only looked at the cases that the ACLU had already uncovered. He didn't look beyond those. But what he found was those investigations remained open for years with no evidence of wrongdoing. The victims of these investigations would be put on terrorist watch lists. And, you can imagine for a political activist, kind of like Scott recounted, when the FBI is going around telling local officials that this political activist is a terrorist, that cripples their ability to be effective in their advocacy. And it creates a huge chilling effect that affects not just the people under investigation, but others active on those political issues, and even further, people who want to be active but feel it's not worth it to come under that kind of surveillance. So it has a real serious effect on our democracy, and that's really, one of the most dangerous parts about this.
How has the FBI changed from Bush to Obama? I mean, Robert Mueller's now been head of the FBI for almost 10 years under Bush and Obama.
This meeting that we were brought to about the expansion of the FBI's authority last month was really the first opportunity. We were hoping, because we had criticized the 2008 guidelines that were put in place in December of 2008, so literally just a month before the Obama administration took over, we had criticized those heavily. So we were hoping that what we were going to hear was that our criticism had been heard and that they were going to scale back some of the things they were doing. One of the things that we're still working on is an authority the FBI has given itself in their internal guidelines that allows them to collect racial and ethnic demographic data and to map racial and ethnic communities and collect racial and ethnic behavioral information, whatever that is. And we're trying to use Freedom of Information Act to get at that information, but it's difficult.
Scott Crow, what are your plans right now? And I want to ask Mike German also, what kind of recourse does someone like Scott have? Now that you've learned the extent of the surveillance, do you even know, Scott, right now if you're being monitored?
I assume that I am because my documents ended in 2008. They said that was all that there was. And just to clarify, they gave me 500 pages of 1,200 pages. So there's still 700 pages more to get. We're going to sue to try to get the rest of them and try to get the redactions taken away so we can see what was going on. But my biggest thing is not to tell people not to be afraid, because everything that people fear have had happen to me, and I'm still okay. And I don't mean that in a cavalier way, because it's been definitely traumatizing at different points. But if we don't come out and be open about this, then they've already won, and that the surveillance and the war on terror wins against us.
And Mike German, the kind of recourse people have, how do they even find out if they are the subject of surveillance?
It's very difficult. I mean, one of the things that we're just finding out in a California case is that the FBI and the Department of Justice have been interpreting a portion of the Freedom of Information Act to allow them to falsely say they do not have responsive documents when they do. So it makes unclear whether the government is even being upfront about whether they have documents that they're not giving you. So it's very difficult, but we're working with the Freedom of Information Act the best we can. We're working through the courts, and we're working on Capitol Hill trying to get our elected representatives to realize how important this is to the American public and to our democracy. If people are afraid to engage in political activism, that's ultimately going to hurt us more than the waste of resources and other aspects of this that are also untenable.
Well, I want to thank you both very much for being with us. Mike German, National Security Policy Counsel for the American Civil Liberties Union, formerly an FBI agent specializing in domestic counterterrorism. And thank you to Scott Crow, Austin-based activist targeted by FBI surveillance. His book, Black Flags and Windmills, is set to be published in August. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.